I'd like to introduce my panel, and I'm going to have them say more about themselves as well, starting with Scott Rupp from Modern Times Group. Do you want to tell us
Sure.
your title? And
yeah, happy to be here. I'm Scott Rupp. I'm the U.S. Managing Director for Modern Times Group, which is a publicly traded European media company based in Stockholm, about $2 billion in revenue, $3 billion market cap. A third of our business is digital. The balance is TV. And within digital, we're very active in gaming, esports, and digital video. In gaming, we own Kongregate and majority of InnoGames, and in esports, ESL and DreamHack.
Shanti Bergel.
Hi, my name is Shanti Bergel. I'm the EVP for a company called FunPlus. FunPlus was a startup that raised about $75 million in venture capital and then had an exit event of sorts. We sold in an asset sale our casual games division for $1 billion to a Chinese company in 2016. We still retain our mid-core game portfolio, and we're a fully independent company now that that asset sale liquidated our investors. So our entire company is now owned by two founders. And so we have our mid-core game portfolio, which includes a game called King of Avalon, which is one of the top 20 grossing games in the world. And we are now investing in other companies in an area that we call digital entertainment, which includes games, but isn't limited to it. So for example, we're an investor in an esports team called Cloud9. We're also an investor and part operator of a mobile streaming company, as well as some other content plays in digital entertainment.
Michael Chang.
Hi, I'm Mike Chang. I work at NCSoft. It's a large public Korean game company. Best known mostly for PC MMOs, though recently we had success with a mobile product, a title Lineage that launched in Korea alone, did about $700 million in 6 months. I do investments and acquisitions for the company. We're looking for interesting people to back. And before this, I used to do M&A for Electronic Arts, along with Shanti here.
Hi, I'm Chris Heatherly, and I oversee games at NBCUniversal. We're out of the Universal Studios group, and I came to Universal to help transition our model from pure play licensing over to value-added publishing. And so over the last year, I've been building a team and bringing developers on board to develop games around our IP that we can publish. In addition to that, I advise within the company on other ways we touch the games industry, so things like VR, esports, investments that we make out of places like Comcast Ventures. So I kind of touch all of those things, at least as an advisor.
Good. So yeah, if you're wondering, yeah, this is about acquiring game companies. And earlier this morning at 11 a.m., Eric Goldberg moderated the session on investing in game companies. And I went to that. I don't think anybody else went to that session.
I was
Scott?
there.
Okay, yeah. I was curious what you guys also think about what's hot for investments now, particularly because that's sort of the beginning of the eventual acquisition process, right? So if there are things you think are hot, I think for the panel we got a good sense that virtual reality was cooling down, but esports was heating up. That's the general vibe. I don't know, Scott, did you have any other sort of takeaway from that session as well?
Yeah, I mean, certainly esports is hot. I would say as we think about areas to invest in for our venture fund, it is focused on esports and gaming, and we're interested in certain sub-themes within those categories. For us in esports, we're looking at mobile esports and analytics and analogous businesses to other pieces of the traditional sports ecosystem. And for gaming, we think there's a huge hole in the market to actually back developer publishers, that there's a lot of value to be created there, and there's sort of a pretty healthy VC market in Europe, but not as many active investors here in the States, so we see a gap there. But then we're looking at every evolution in publishing, so we're looking at alternative ways to drive discovery, alternative ways to finance games, alternative ways to market games. So there's lots of fertile ground across the space.
And Shanti, how about just your take on investments now as well?
Yeah, I would say our take on investments, so we think, like at a very high level, like in terms of maturity curve. So mobile, for example, quite mature. We're probably more likely to acquire proven quantities in mobile than we would in a nascent environment like, say, instant gaming or games for voice on Echo or on Google Home. Those are areas where like we see people attempting to build new businesses now, and it's an interesting place to invest, to answer your question. So typically, as an investor, we think about kind of the early stage and where kind of new markets might grow, but we are not ready to kind of jump in there with like our internal development studios, which are pretty much committed to more mature businesses. So like for example, King of Avalon, the game I mentioned, that is a standing dev team of some size, and we can't easily just rip them off of that because it's a very large revenue driver for us. And so it's incumbent upon us, if we want to kind of participate in some of the new platforms that are up and coming, to work with folks outside the company and to invest in their companies and try and identify places where we can be helpful to people who are developing what might be kind of a next generation business.
Could we ask the audience, and it's tough because we have lights coming on us, by a show of hands, how many of you would be excited to start a new mobile game company right now?
A couple of hands?
So
yeah.
3.
That's the highest percentage you've ever gotten over the
That's
last
the highest
10
ever
years.
gotten on this answer, right? So that's boundless optimism right there. Number 2, to start a new PC or console game studio.
This guy wants to start everything.
Facebook Instant Games, HTML5 games. She was an investor before, so keep an eye on that. Games for Amazon Alexa or Google Home. Interesting.
Yeah.
So
Do
VR?
AR and VR?
VR, AR, mixed reality. Pretty brutal right now. It's a very interesting indication. There's a very interesting dynamic, I think, going on here. The gaming markets have never been larger since I joined in 2010, Shanti a little bit longer. Everyone's a gamer, everyone has a phone right now. But the opportunities for independence are certainly a lot more interesting, shall we say, than when we started this. When I was going to these conferences in Seattle in 2010, there were all the games from Big Fish, all the PC client downloadables, evolved onto Facebook, evolved onto free-to-play mobile, new Xbox, new PlayStation, VR kind of did one of these. We're all looking for something in AR, Facebook Instant, audio games. These are the biggest markets ever, but it is also the most challenging, right? We're all hunting for that new area. We don't have that new next platform. It's changing the dynamics of what kind of deals we do right now and the types of things that people should be working on, at least in the short to medium term.
So I'm a lot more bullish. I mean, I have felt, and Dean has heard me rant about this before, but I feel that the investor community has always been too bearish on the mobile market. I mean, it's the biggest, most democratized, gaming market that there's ever been. Everyone in the world is playing games now. And if you look at companies like Playrix, there's probably 4 or 5 new entrants in the top 20 grossing every year. I think that the challenge with free-to-play games on mobile is that there are very few people who are really good at them, and you have to be good at a lot of things, and the infrastructural and tool investments are significant. And then there's the UA hurdle, right? But good teams that are good at mobile free-to-play are breaking through and are making a lot of money, but that's admittedly a very small number of companies given the difficulty factor. I think that the instance games market is very, very interesting. Although I worry about, there's going to be a lot of rev splits there between the platform guys and Facebook, which is going to make the economics challenging.
Could we ask, just so we know that the audience knows, how many of you have played Facebook Instant Games? Okay, just Facebook, the 3 bars, Instant Games, download.
Yeah, but what's driving that market is virality, which is what drove the early Facebook Canvas games. If Facebook ever throttled back on the virality like they did on Canvas, it could kill that industry overnight, which I think has to make one a little nervous. But and look, long term, I think, even I'm even VR, I'm not ready to count it out. I mean, it's going to be several years, but we need the right headsets, and just the barrier to entry, the cost to get in VR, the complexity of those systems. I mean, when we start getting to the 6th degree of freedom wireless headsets, I think we'll start to see whether that's a market or not. But look, there are more ways to play games than ever before, and new ways to make games are being invented, like HQ. I mean, this thing is a total, for those who haven't seen it, HQ is it's a game show that's live streamed, and these guys are getting over 1 million concurrent players right now. I mean, it's MMO size numbers. So I think the appetite is endless for games. There are challenges in the market like user acquisition and other things, but there's never been a better time to make games, in my opinion.
So just to nuance that point a bit, I mean, I agree there's amazing opportunities in the space. However, if you look at the companies that are breaking through, you mentioned Playrix. Playrix is an old company. Playrix is not a company minted last year and going to the top of the charts. So the presentation right before we came on was from Game Insight. Super compelling story. Congratulations. Like the success of Guns of Boom. I'm a player. It's an amazing story. However, Game Insight also not a new company. Mm-hmm. Our company, founded 2010, had a huge exit. However, we have been working at this for like a long time. And so, to start a mobile game company right now, to Michael's point, as an investor, I would worry about that because, as an investor, I think, okay, how far do you have to go to be market competitive with people who are up here right now? And what are you bringing to the table? So, if you used to work at Supercell, you used to work at EA, you used to work at Machine Zone, those are all good things, but how fast can you come up to speed from a live ops perspective and beat the pants off the LTV of the guy next to you? So these are the questions that need to be answered in order to answer your investment question.
And we're trying to be, we have to be very creative now. Whether it be influencers, whether it be esports, whatever it may be, something to drive discovery, something to drive a lower cost of acquisition. We're all having to be very clever right now. Some unique differentiation as opposed to just, tide rising all boats. We are having to be stock pickers now versus stock market selectors.
Well, and that's I interviewed Dan Fiden back in February of 2016. And I'm kind of curious how some of the thinking may have changed since then. But back then, he was saying, everybody else is swimming in a certain direction, like into new platforms that have zero penetration, like VR, right? And he wanted to take his $50 million fund and invest it in mobile games back then. But it sounds like now that that's not an automatic sort of strategy for you guys.
So Dan is our CSO at FunPlus. So I would say in 2016, that was a little bit more of a reasonable thing to say. But even so, it is being said from the point of a company that has a lot of resources that it can bring to bear. So why would you take money from FunPlus in 2016? You would take money from FunPlus in 2016 because we know a lot about certain aspects of the mobile market. We can add a lot of value from an operations perspective. What is the thing that a lot of Western developers are missing when they are, kind of coming to this market? It is an understanding of LTV, it is an understanding of live operations, it is an understanding of how to arbitrage CPI and LTV effectively. And so those are things that FunPlus, in an internal analysis, thought, hey, we can bring these to bear in terms of being a good partner to those who might be coming up. And full disclosure, everybody who came through that door, got measured alongside the same criteria that we would use for an internal studio. And so it is a competitive filter. It is not an act of charity to establish a $50 million fund and say hey guys, let's go make games. And so the investment criteria for a nascent category are much more relaxed. It's much more of an exploration. It's much more of R&D. Whereas in a fully developed category where we can see all the numbers on App Annie, it is a different thing, and there's a reason that we as a company look at acquisition in that bucket as opposed to investment. With exceptions.
One of the points is
with exceptions.
This is a very sort of fast evolving thing that your thinking in sectors just changes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, 2 years is an eternity in mobile.
I mean, to that point in gaming right now, people catch up pretty quickly. I grew up in a world in venture capital where you're trying to invest in leaders in small but rapidly growing markets. So when the large guys came in, you could defend that position. We talk about Facebook Instant Games today. Zynga's there. They haven't missed this one, right? Zynga has With Friends games out there. Blackstorm Labs with Everwing has raised a bit of money. But there are large guys in that market still because they're seeing the virality that they remember from Facebook Canvas days on Facebook Instant. They're not seeing the retention. We'll see ad monetization, we'll see in-app purchase monetization coming up. Maybe we'll see combinations of chatbots or other things to make it even more immersive. But we're asking and encouraging you, because we're all investors here, we're encouraging you to find those undiscovered, untapped markets where you can be a leader in a small but ideally long-term and fast-growing market in the future here. If you can find those, defend that position, you'll have something of great value that we can then, frankly, pay you for or fund you for at some point in the close future.
And Chris, you know about changing patterns in the business too from your previous experience at Disney. And there's sort of almost a cyclical pattern to Disney's interest or lack of interest in games.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really talk about Disney, but you know, I think for entertainment companies, you know, our view at Comcast and Universal is that, you know, Comcast started off as a cable company. It's becoming a broadband company, really. And, you know, the people who own the company know what's going down those pipes and what's growing broadband use. Some of that's streaming video, but a lot of that is gaming. And, you know, so we've got a management team at Comcast and NBCUniversal that has a very progressive view towards the games business. We're also, you know, we're heavily invested into traditional, you know, media assets already, right? So, you know, we're a company that has a lot of capital, but we're in search of growth. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is attractive to our company is that games are adjacent to both the things that we do in the cable business, and they're adjacent to the things that we do in the entertainment side of the business, but it's like a whole new media business that we kind of found. So that's the opportunity for us.
So I usually like to get my handle on just how many acquisitions are happening and how many dollars are being poured in each year. I used to track that back in 2011, 12 or so, and then DigiCapital picked that up, and then I don't know of anybody who's really doing that now. PitchBook has some material, but they don't really publish it that often. So you know, we're sort of left a bit in the dark with you know, where's the trend going as far as acquisitions go in the game industry? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it kind of quiet?
I'll ask the audience this way. How many of you can name a major acquisition in 2017? What comes to mind when you think about a game company that was acquired in 2017 that was significant, notable, that you remember it? Respawn.
Respawn.
Yeah.
So yeah,
First deal
EA
since
acquired
2013.
Respawn for
Pixelberry.
So first deal
million.
since 2013 for EA, right? Yeah. You said Pixelberry. How many of you guys know what Pixelberry is? Okay. Targeting the female demographic with a story-driven game, expanded an audience, right? You wouldn't have thought, it was quite a sizable company, actually. But other major acquisitions? I'm not going to this audience here because this audience knows, but exactly.
They were interesting the same week, just about, right? And
in 2016,
the
I bet you...
same bidders were going for the same
Yeah, but if I asked this question in 2016, I bet you there'd be a lot more names out there. 2015, remember the times when Playdom and Playfish, which Shanti was with, all the Facebook game companies were getting acquired by one.
So I guess the biggest deal, one thing PitchBook does have is sort of the list of biggest deals. And the biggest deal, I guess, of all time in games is Tencent putting money into Supercell for most of it at a $10.2 billion valuation in mid-2016. It's interesting that you know, Disney only paid $4 billion to buy Lucas, right? And so it's a very interesting number that way. Activision paid $5.9 billion for King. IGT got acquired for $4.7 billion. Mojang for $2.5 billion. So we have some real numbers here. I mean, you guys, you know, I suppose you don't feel like you know, you're in the wrong sector, right? As far as
I mean, it feels very, it certainly feels very active in the deal markets. Maybe there's not as many big fish to go after anymore, but there's a lot of attractive, profitable, growing companies in the sort of 20 to 100 million revenue range, and all of those processes are quite competitive. but the pricing is still quite reasonable. So it's still, yeah, you have to win, you have to outmaneuver others, but I think there's a lot of action and there's a lot of opportunity to create value still.
So I compare when we grew up doing M&A, 2010 to 2013. Basically, if you didn't do it, Zynga would do it. If you didn't do it, it felt very frothy. You had to move or you'd lose an opportunity. The good news, at least from this perspective, is right now there's time to do diligence, time to do work, find the right companies. I'd say the good news for this audience here as well, back in 2010, 2011, there were people who were joining the business because it was the flavor of the day. They wanted to go into the hot area. What I like about how things are now is people who are in the space, it's not the easiest area, but it's people who are dedicated to games. And I enjoy working with real game developers and people who are passionate about making games and seeing their products out there and having people play them and enjoy those things, right? So I think it's kind of a yin and yang here. The give is we have more time to do work and we have time to look for real and meaningful companies.
Yep.
The good side for you, you get the chance to build good and meaningful companies and have fun doing it without having all the frothy people who just kind of came in the business just because it was hot back then.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think a lot of those early mobile exits were, companies that were not solid companies yet, that were probably bought for values that were too high, that burned a lot of acquirers and, and kind of killed the interest for a little while. And I see that as our opportunity because when we work with, because where we specialize is working with, kind of small to medium-sized developers who have good teams but are looking for a way to break through in the App Store, and we have IP, and we have access to the database of customers from across the company, and we can connect our customers. Connect game makers with our rabid fans for the properties that we have. So, we're in a very unique situation to help some of these guys that maybe they're not getting an exit, but we have a way to help them break through and get to the next level.
So why aren't you guys each going into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin mining?
So that's really interesting. No one brought that up, but how many think cryptocurrency would be an interesting area to do gaming work? Anyone play CryptoKitties?
Yeah.
Everybody's doing crypto.
Yeah. We just had Brian Fargo formerly from Exile, or still there,
this morning.
announce his newest one today, right? Yeah. Those are opportunities. Those are new opportunities. We have to figure out whether there's something real to be had here. The entrepreneurs do as well, but that is a new area of growth potentially, right? In the existing areas, there's still no leader in racers or shooters in the West. So, let me take one aside here with Guns of Boom. But in general, EA, Activision, Take-Two, they haven't launched a winning racer or shooter in mobile, right? Is there still opportunity there? I think so, right? When I was at EA, Disney bought Lucas. Now, why would I bring this up? These are two big companies. What could we possibly do with this, right? Disney bought Lucas, and in the announcement, Disney talks about the movies and Star Wars and Lucasfilm and Skywalker Sound. They don't say anything about the game studio. You know what? The Lucas Games guys, they get scared. They're like, hold on, what's going on here? Are we going to have jobs? And it turns out that led to a discussion internally at EA that bubbled up and became a 10-year license to Star Wars, which cranked out Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, Battlefront 2. In these sorts of big deals, there's opportunities for everyone. Disney's reported to and signed a deal with Fox. It's going to take some time to close. Could you do something with that? Or what could you do with that? I'd just like to point out areas where there might be opportunities that you're not immediately obvious, that might be something that one of you or one of us could play on at some point in time. So.
Yeah, and there's this idea that some franchises sort of come and go or rise and fall, and it's interesting that in 2018 we may get 2 Harry Potter games on mobile, one from Niantic and one from Jam City, and the Jam City folks pointed out that we're attracted to this because there hadn't been a really big one from a really big Harry Potter game on mobile, and we were surprised at that. So the opportunities kind of seem to materialize from nowhere sometimes.
Well, although what I think is interesting when you talk about IP is that if you look at almost every major franchise, you know, what you'll see is you'll see one game that's really big, and then 3 or 4 games that are pretty small, and that are the one game is almost always 70%, and the 30% is all the other games. Now, if you're Marvel and you're the biggest brand, you know, IP on mobile, that 30% can be really meaningful. You know, if you're not, if you're smaller, that 30%, you know, is a challenge. Now, part of that is, I think, is an artifact of the licensing model, because what has happened is that when you license 5 different companies to make 5 different games, one of them has a higher LTV, and they beat the other guy's brains out on Facebook with user acquisition, instead of cross-promoting across the network, which is the way that King and Playrix and these guys that get big, they leverage the scale of their network. So the thing that we're trying to do is build our network and use the, you know, success of our games to drive the success of the next game. We'll see how that works, but that's our operating theory. But it'll be interesting to see how, when you have a Harry Potter out there that's got 2 games, you know, do both find an audience, or does one win out?
And to dive a little bit into what Chris is saying, let's pick on Marvel for a minute. Let's be careful, because I'm a huge Marvel fan and I would like to get something from them someday. Can you name the Marvel titles out there on mobile right now? Contest Champions, Puzzle Quest,
Future Fight.
Netmarble Future Fight, the old DNA games. I don't know if they're still around or
War
not.
Heroes.
Contest of Champions.
So how many of them are out there, right? And if one game, let's just say Netmarble, Contest of Champions through Kabam, has the highest LTV, and they can spend on Facebook to buy the users who are fans of Marvel above everyone else, maybe you shouldn't have so many licenses out there, right? And now we're going to have a couple of Harry Potter games. It's going to be interesting, right?
Mm-hmm. They seem to be in pretty different categories, though. So
Yeah.
That's what they all say. It's a different genre. This one's a city builder. This one's more like a Clash Royale. I don't know that I believe that. So
Family Guy's done well with you know, 2 very different games that are you know, well positioned together. But that's a more of a niche IP. But I think genre differentiation is key. You know.
Actually, I'm going to pick on mobile for a minute, and we don't have to. But what do you think is the most valuable license right now on mobile? If you could get it, hands down, maybe at a reasonable price, but if you could get a license in mobile right now, what IP would you chase? What do you think is most popular right now, or what's the best license, do you think? I'd just love to hear from the audience what they think.
when that's not already out there.
It could be already out there too. Star Wars?
Pokemon.
Pokemon, okay. So I bought a studio that made Simpsons Tapped Out. It's been a long time since there's been a new Simpsons. That Tapped Out game has been around for it's a really long time now.
Yeah.
It's a pretty valuable license.
Yep.
Family Guy? Anyone for movies? Do any of you see a movie title, a licensed movie title that became a top grossing title or a very successful title on mobile yet? Me neither. Interesting, right?
I
So
think though
active
part of the
TV
reason is those get when you approach them as movie games,
Yeah.
they almost never work.
Absolutely.
You can't drive a free-to-play game with one movie. You know, you've got to have, you know, Star Wars works, or you know, something like a Fast and the Furious can work, because we have, you know,
Consistent movie
8
franchises.
movies,
Yes.
you know.
So some of I think the VCs, you know, out here may be looking to you guys for some guidance in some way as to what you're interested in. That's one question. But then the second question is, like, who do you look to for some guidance? Like, do you then look to, you know, the Hollywood companies, the IP holders? Some of you are IP holders, or do you look to the platform owners? I have a reason for bringing that up. Maybe the first question first. I mean, you know, the venture capitalists, what should they learn from your actions, I guess, as far as maybe where they should be thinking about where to invest?
I have an answer, but I'm going last.
I think for us, we're maybe a little different than some others. We have a bit of an aversion to licensed IP, mostly because we're a broadcaster who licenses a lot of IP for television, and every year we grow the audience, and every year we pay more for the rights, so which is a tough model. So we very much have a bias towards companies that own their own IP. So that's what we're looking for the most part, when we're buying game companies.
Congregate makes sense for you there?
I mean, Congregate obviously publishes titles and has licensed IP games, but part of the strategy there is to start owning more studios, and we've been rolling up indie studios under the Congregate umbrella so that the mix of first-party titles increases over time. So owned IP is big, and also we're looking for, I mean, it sounds boring, but sound businesses, so so things that are just hot, and we're happy to be late to certain sectors on an M&A transaction to pay for a company that's working. Our VC approach is very different, obviously. But.
Anybody else have a thought on that?
I have one thought, and it ties back to the IP conversation in that probably the most interesting, I'm not yet sure if it's exciting, but it's probably the most interesting IP deal that I saw recently was between Skybound and a Korean developer called Gameville. And it was a reverse license in that Skybound is going to go create a full world of transmedia properties based on Gameville mobile IP. And to me, that was a very interesting difference in the way that these two companies decided to come together and create something, because they're trying to fuse the, like the clear kind of business potential of mobile, which I think is all kind of well established at this point, with like the amazing storytelling capabilities of Skybound, which, if you don't know, is the original creator of The Walking Dead. And it is a very interesting organization, and they really believe in kind of IP experimentation to the point that they're kind of partnering with a, kind of a non-traditional partner to do a very non-traditional thing. And they're going to, from what I can tell, from what they've announced, pull in threads that, like a lot of us can only really dream of attempting to, kind of access in a single franchise, such as streaming, competitive gaming, like a long-standing world that is potentially, kind of multi-title and transmedia in a very real way. And to answer your question, like this is what I think, like venture capitalists should be spending more time with, is like how can I create something in entertainment that is truly differentiated and yet like not just a pump and dump. I think a lot of people in the corp dev role in entertainment feel very frequently that the interest level of some investors is around ginning up something on a new platform, getting a price tag on it as soon as possible, and selling it out before anybody on the receiving end can figure out how much it's worth. And so that's not a great relationship. Whereas if they have a sincere long-term interest in being a member of the community and developing a property across 10 years, like that's a pretty, kind of interesting group to be, like kind of in conversation with. And so that's what I wish, like kind of the investor class was interested in, is creating partnerships like that and kind of tent poles like that the rest of us could look at and go like, oh my God, there's an interesting place to think about one corner of an ecosystem. Where can I put my part of this ecosystem? As opposed to, like what is all too frequently just simply an arbitrage play.
I agree with that. I think there's a big future ahead in IP creation, first on mobile, and go in the other direction.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, we have looked at, from an M&A perspective, we're in a position where we have some strong IP like Fast and Furious and Jurassic and Trolls and Minions, but we would like more, and it's amazing how little game IP there is out there that really is extensible to other, channels of exploitation, whether it's consumer products or television. A lot of game IP is really about that game, and a reason to engage with that mechanic. But I think there's hope. You're starting to see. I was talking to a friend at Funko the other day, and video game based characters is one of their biggest. They do collectible toys. Video game based characters are actually taking share now away from traditional entertainment. So I think we are at the point where you'll start to see game IP turn into true kind of, Disney-like franchises. But boy, I wish there were more people pursuing it from that angle, because the sensibilities, having worked at Disney and having worked with game makers, the sensibility is very different. And we need, I do think there's a level of value to be unlocked if you had more developers pursuing game development from the standpoint of how do I use this to build a franchise in the same way that, you know, that Disney or Universal or Warner Brothers think about that when they make movies.
Thank you. So I did like a decade of venture capital and private equity before I fell into games, and I literally randomly fell into games. Then I did this, started in 2010 at EA. When I started in venture capital, like 30% of the deals I saw looked good to me. As I got a little bit older, like 10%. A little bit older, like 1%. And actually, that's actually the right thing to do. As you see more and more of these, as time goes on, you start realizing just how difficult it is to grow a business into a long-term sustainable business. And what looks good when you're really, frankly, young or inexperienced doesn't look so good after some period of time. In gaming, what I've looked for has changed since I started talking at these casual conferences in 2011 to now. But where I've had the greatest success is when I spend time with people like yourselves, interesting entrepreneurs, dedicated to gaming, but the best ones make me feel really emotionally and intellectually uncomfortable. I talk to someone and I'm like, you can make money doing this? You can get people to play games by thinking along these lines? Like honestly, if HQ, the trivia guys came in, I might be like, can you really do this? If, you know, something that makes you think.
HQ trivia you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So things that make you think, oh my God, you can actually get people addicted to a game and happy to play a game or spend money on a game by doing something like this. So that's always what I'm looking for, someone who makes me think outside of the normal boundaries, right? Again, making me somewhat uncomfortable, at the same time, you know, realizing that there's a way to make money here, a differentiated product that no one has ever seen before, right? A different business model, a different game, a different play style. When we started in 2010 till now, I haven't been surprised in a long time. You know, in 2010, it was like gotcha boxes were kind of new for us, not new in Asia, but it was pretty interesting for us to see what was going on in free-to-play mechanics here. You know, I'll never forget when Supercell launched Heyday, and I'm farming the crops in Heyday, and I hold my hand down, my finger down, and I'm sweeping around the crops. What a fun feeling. Or, you know, Angry Birds. When you did the pull on Angry Birds with Rovio, and you flung the bird to hit the pigs, right? Have you had any of that kind of touch magic in recent times? Have you seen something on a new mobile phone game that's felt that different in a while, right? So I'm always looking for something that makes me feel either physically or emotionally or intellectually uncomfortable, but it will turn out to be a really great idea down the road here, and no one has that today. Right?
What about, let's say, getting to that second part of that question, like, you know, if the platform owners have their own interests and they want to push in a certain direction, they want to push you guys in a certain direction, like how much do you go along with it? Like say, you know, Intel last week announced Intel Studios. They would love to see VR take off. They want to make it happen as well. So they started a studio in Hollywood for immersive media. They want to team up with people to teach them how to use this technology to create, you know, brand new media. They cut a deal with Paramount as their first sort of deal. What do you guys think of that kind of push that is happening from a platform owner?
I can think of two companies where I think this has been somewhat successful. Not exactly. One is Valve and one is Epic, right? Epic has their engine, they made their own games, and then they started licensing it out, and other people started using Unreal. Valve, you know, Valve had Steam, they had their own games, and then, frankly, now everyone else on the PC side has to go on Steam. I don't know that a platform like Intel or Apple, by doing that, will force us to something. If they make great products, then we'll make products for that. People have different ideas.
Yeah, I would say, you know, like there's at least two schools of thought, or at least two kind of, you know, kind of types of pitches that I've been on the receiving end of in that context. One is, do the thing I say and I will give you a shiny, and that's basically the relationship. And then the other is, oh, what do you actually need in order to make a better game?
Right.
How can I, as the platform holder, improve your life in some meaningful way? And like clearly, as a game developer, you'd love to be exclusively, kind of involved in these kind of conversations over here. Unfortunately, that's not the way of the world, and you're frequently involved in these kind of conversations over here. I think these conversations don't yield good product. I think they yield checkbox features, and they yield, kind of conversations that, kind of are very bounded. Like you will incorporate that just as far as you have to in order to get the shiny. It's like you're dealing with game developers; they're going to game the system by definition. Whereas over here, if you make a meaningful effort to understand what it is that like game developers in your ecosystems have challenges with, how can they make better franchises, how can you enable them to think more longer term, like what does it mean to develop their actual business as opposed to just get featured, for example. If you engage in that conversation as a platform, I think you will find yourself on the receiving end of really valuable information that you can choose to action if you choose. And there are a couple of platforms that actually do that. But at least these two schools of thoughts exist, and I have a definite preference over here.
Yeah, my least favorite thing are the platforms who, don't want to give you any data. And it's like, but part of being on the platform should be like I get data. I mean, I'd have to say, Google really is doing a fantastic job in the game space and working with developers in that way. I think, in helping us make better games and giving us, best practices and very proactive approach. And, we haven't talked about Steam very much, but Steam is a very different marketplace than the mobile app stores. And I think part of it is because they are, of, for, and by gamers. But you have not seen that has become a vibrant marketplace that has given birth to a lot of hits over the last couple of years, and not just Valve stuff. It's stuff like PUBG that just comes out of nowhere and becomes one of the most played games in the world. And so I think I think that the platforms that embrace gaming certainly build better lasting businesses than the ones who don't.
You can't force it. In 2011 at EA, I remember that Amazon was kicking off their phone, and then Windows as well. And there used to be, frankly, jokes among developers. Hey, we're just making our game pointed over to Amazon phone or Windows phone because they're paying us. Covers the cost to engineer, cost plus a little bit, why wouldn't we do that, right? And those things never really took off. Right?
Yeah. Those things don't tend to get prioritized. Yeah. Fortunately, I think the dynamics have changed with the platform. It's a bit more balanced than it used to be.
So I want to see what kind of reaction I can get out of you guys. I'm going to pretend I'm Brian Fargo for a bit here. And so I talked to Brian Fargo last week about his initial coin offering. He's got an ICO happening soon. He's raising money to create a token that can be used to buy digital games on the PC, an alternative app store to Steam. And as Brian, I'm offering you guys that I'm going to give you 95% of the proceeds of the sales of digital games on my platform. I keep 5%. I also give consumers who buy these games the right to resell them. They can get 25% of the sale price. You guys can set the sale price, but you also get, say, 70% coming back to you, which is the amount you get now coming from Apple, from Google, from Steam. Everybody takes their 30% cut. So this is going to liberate you guys. Being independent from the app stores is actually going to be a very good money-making thing for you. So are you going to support me? Are you going to give me your games for my ICO, my digital platform?
Number one, I'm not going to answer until I finish lunch this Thursday. But I would say this too. As much as it's painful that Apple and Google and Xbox and PlayStation take 30%, there is something they give for that. And people have varying opinions about whether they take too much or not. I think that's fair. But again, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a user adoption question at the end of the day. It's like how many people coming through, like that store. Like forget how it's technically organized. Like that's actually from a business perspective not at all the interesting part of it. You know, use blockchain, don't use blockchain, doesn't matter.
Users can't sell their digital games now. They can
Doesn't
sell
matter.
their physical games.
Are there going to be a mass of users engaging with this ecosystem in a way
Well, I'm
that
Brian
they're going to
Fargo,
become
so
my
I'm
customers?
going to get
That's
the
only
best
question.
games on my platform because I know
Great.
all those.
I have a lot of love for Brian. He gave me my very first job in games. So, you know, like, I would never bet against Brian necessarily. But all I'm saying is that, you know, like, a store is as, to somebody selling goods in it, is as good as the number of people who are coming to it. So if you're Walmart, I know that you have a lot of customers. If you're the corner store, I know you don't, right? So, I mean, like, is it going to be the corner store or is it going to be Walmart? You know, like, once it's Walmart, I think everybody will go there just because it has the customers. Whether it uses blockchain or not, I don't care what, you know, what cash register Walmart and the corner store use, unless it has some benefit to me personally. So can I resell my games? That's interesting, but is it going to be the thing that causes me to become a customer? And is it going to cause 10 million other people to become a customer? I don't know yet. But when there are 10 million people, let me know, because then I'll answer the question yes. Until then, I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any customers there.
I'll get back to you.
I tend to agree with that. Not to mention, you know, sometimes there's risk of associating your IP with things that don't work or don't get off the ground, you know, so you're sort of likely to wait.
There's also the cost of integration. So, I mean, like, how much effort is it to take a punt, right? So if it's easy, then, you know, like, that's not so much of a concern. But I mean, if you ask any of the developers in here how many, you know, kind of third-party APIs they've been offered to integrate, which will only take an hour, then, you know, you have some sense of the issue. It's like, how many stores can you legitimately support before you've diluted your development resources to the point that you're no longer doing a good job at the one thing you said you would do? And so, like, that it becomes a problem, especially in a live ops environment, if you have to replicate live ops teams, or you have to replicate events, you have to replicate technology, you know, like, then you're just really, you know, going down a, you know, like a fragmented morass of problems. So, you know, like, what does it really mean to put a cryptocurrency-enabled thingamajiggy thing I've never heard of before, and there's no reference case for me to reference? I don't know. You know, like, do I want to go first through the door? Maybe, if I'm a real big crypto enthusiast. As you can say, I'm probably not that guy. Maybe try the next guy and then tell me about his experience.
I feel like all the value in games going forward is going to be in games as a service. And so, you know, I'm less excited about ideas that are about premium games in general. You know, and even if you look at the esports phenomenon, right, there's a tension there. If you want to make your game, multiplayer big game, big enough, it's got to have an accessible price point, reach enough people. So, you know, I think there's a reason that these $30 games have taken off. There's just a small number of $60 games that can exist in the market. And, you know, if you look at Rocket League, one of the things that got them established and started building the esports around it was the fact that they were bundled in with, I think it was the PlayStation subscription, and some number of millions of people got the game for free, and that sort of jump-started the whole thing. So, I don't want to say that free-to-play is the inevitability of the mark of every game, because I don't think that's true, and I think there's certainly a viable market on Steam for premium games. It doesn't exist at all on mobile. You know, when people talk about cryptocurrency, you know, it's interesting. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around, because this is maybe where I'm getting old and set in my ways. But, you know, came up through that Ralph Koster mentality of the client is in the hands of the enemy, and, you know, why would I ever want to give away central control of my economy and that kind of thing? So, I'm sure somebody will come up with a really creative way to use, But you
already gave it to Apple, Google, and, you know, Facebook.
We pay for distribution.
We pay for distribution.
We pay for access to customers.
It's not
for
build
free.
it and you will come. They have the users there, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, not only that, I mean, when people complain about the 30% scrape they give to those guys, I just think they're being whiners, because, you know, when I used to work in the retail business, you know, and sell toys and stuff like that, and you know, Walmart will take 50 points easy, you know. So the thing is that what Apple and those guys bring to the table is, They bring some level of featuring. They bring the device, the operating system, they've got everybody's credit card. It's so frictionless, all this other stuff. Like, I'll happily pay. I mean, when I ran Club Penguin, I mean, I can't tell you what a pain it was to run the payment system. I mean, it was a major distraction from gaming. So you can have your 30 points to kind of take care of the pain, you know?
I'd like to just triple down on that point because I was in free-to-play back when, there were no app stores. Life is so much better now. I mean, like, we rolled our own banking system. We included credit cards and PayPal and, prepaid cards and pay by mobile across, like so many countries across the world. Oh my God, the different fraud resolution methodology across, like we had, I don't know, I mean, including aggregators, probably several hundred payment mechanisms across all the, like territories in the world. Then we had to advertise on top of that in order to bring customers in. Like we were, like spending way more margin than we're currently paying to Apple or Google. So if you remember the bad old days of like being on the open internet and trying to run your own banking system and pay for advertising in a fragmented, kind of ad ecosystem, like the world of Apple, Google, Facebook, yes, it sucks, but on the other hand, it's so much better than what we used to have. And is it improved or supplanted by this? I don't know, maybe, but what we have now is actually better than people give it credit for. To Chris's point,
it boils down to the gaming markets have never been larger for any of us.
For good reason.
That's right.
Because of these innovations and because of the centralization of these great services.
And it's growing faster than any other form of media. I mean, I would rather be in this business than the television business. That's the perspective I have as I look at my colleagues who work in cable TV.
Think about content guys right now. There's a reason why the consolidation is happening with Disney, Fox, and everything else.
That's right.
There's a reason they're a little nervous about Netflix and Amazon, right? So.
Well, as Brian Fargo, I would say you guys are just happy slaves to the apps.
Well, so, yes, I mean, you're talking to people who have, kind of extremely large businesses on those app stores. So, it hasn't been unkind to us, right? So maybe his first customers are not us, right? They're people who are much more experimental. They're much more interested in trying something new because they're starting from a dead stop. And that's fine. Right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Both people can be right in that ecosystem. But I mean, to come to somebody who has an established business and say, no, 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 you're doing it all wrong, it's like, I have $1 billion that says you're wrong about that, right? So, it's fine. Go start something, prove it out, and then we'll see.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.